Welcome to the Ranchonomics Podcast, where we empower you to build a better ranch and transform your operations into a thriving business. I'm your host, John Haskell. Let's get started. Welcome to the Ranchonomics Podcast. We are again joined today by Dr. David Kohl. And Dr. Kohl, today we are going to talk about management mindset, which is a topic that I love to see in the presentations that you give. Last time we got together, we talked primarily about financial things. This time, and we did talk about some other non-financial things when we talked about what successful farms and ranches are doing. But today, I would really like to talk about those non-financial things. So let's dive into what comprises that. Why is management mindset important? What are people doing there?
Well, one of the things oftentimes when lenders look at credit, they'll talk about the 5 C's all the way from cash flow, character, collateral conditions, and capacity. I do believe the next 5 to 10 years is going to be the 6th C that's going to set us apart. What's the 6th C? It's called the cranium.
Okay.
And it's the ability to be able to plan, strategize, execute, and monitor. I call it the 4 cornerstones. That's very critical. And a lot of people will actually plan, but they plan just in their mind. They don't write that plan down. Fewer will strategize, but even fewer execute, because guess what? Execution has consequences. Well, not executing has consequences. And then monitoring, oftentimes we'll develop that business plan, or we'll develop the cash flow plan. We'll stick it in the drawer, or we will look at our finances once a year for tax management from an accountant's standpoint. And nothing against accountants, but they have been told to minimize taxes. And so one of the things that I like to do is expand. And I want to pull off a friend of mine who passed away, Dr. Danny Kleinfelder. He was a professor at Texas A&M University, good friend of mine. And he conceptualized the program called TPAP. It's the Ag Executive Program. I've taught there every year, but one ice storm prevented me from getting there. And we'll have producers from, 22, 25 states. And we had 7 Canadian provinces. We had Aussie there this year. But Dr. Kleinfelder talked about being a 5%er. That is the mindset. And what's the 5%er? He said when he looked at all the participants over the years from TPAP, he said nothing stood out, but what stood out was they were 5% better in many components of their business. In other words, and I aspire you to look at your business and say, how am I 5% better in production, operational efficiency? But you got to be real careful there, because many businesses know the cost of everything and the value of nothing. I hope you all heard that, because sometimes you actually have to increase your cost in certain areas. And we're seeing big companies now, seeing government cut costs across the board. And one of the things is you have to be really careful there. We saw Boeing aircraft do that, and then the door falls off the plane south of Portland, Oregon.
I have made a conscious effort to avoid the word efficiency and go to effectiveness. And I actually learned that in college from a biology professor. But efficiency doesn't win the evolutionary race. Effectiveness does, right?
Exactly. You've got to be efficient but effective. And that's what Dr. Kleinfelder looks at. The other one is, how are you 5% better in marketing and risk management? Now, that could take many angles. Some people are into commodity marketing, other people are into value added, or a combination. And when we talk marketing and risk management, do you have the necessary insurances in your business? Do you have and execute a marketing plan on your livestock, on your grain, et cetera, et cetera? They're also 5% better in finances. And they, again, like we talked on the last podcast, take ownership of those finances, but they concentrate on areas that might help them be proactive to the future. In other words, having the discipline to hold the working capital in good years, being able to have the necessary programs in place if you have to have, a couple of years that are wipeouts, not to lose everything. The other element that is very critical is human resource management. And you'd go, human resource management, how are you 5% better there? It's real interesting. historically, farmers and ranchers were independent, didn't want to deal with people. That'd be my father, the neighbors I grew up with. In the future, you're going to be interdependent, and you're only going to go as far as your ability to work with people. And that everybody says, I don't have any in place. Well, it might be stakeholders, it might be vendors, et cetera, et cetera. I had it said to me very well up in New Hampshire, doing a young farmer rancher conference up there last fall. And a dairy farmer got up and he says, I used to get profits where I focused on production. He says, my daughter is back in business. Her profits are going to be through her ability to work with people and work through people. And I says, bingo. And so you take all those components, and here's my big challenge: production, operational efficiency and effectiveness, marketing and risk management, finance, human resource. What are 3 ways you're going to be 5% better? Write those down. Then you focus on them. And then here's the other thing. What are 3 ways you are effective, and continue those types of practices? In other words, incremental improvement oftentimes allows us to focus on what we're doing very well, but continue those. But then what are other areas that you're going to continue? So that is the management mindset, being the 5%er. And if you look at, let's take athletes, you look at, for example, I know the family, Steph Curry. And the thing is, the amount of shots he takes, he's in there at 5 a.m. in the morning. By the way, this is behind the scenes. And oftentimes, business is boring. It's not glorious, but it's doing those, what we call muscle memory. And I call the muscle memory up here in the management mindset is critical. It's what you're doing away from the ball when nobody's watching is very, very important.
And basketball may be glamorous, a lot of fun, but taking hundreds of foul shots in the dark while nobody's looking is not that fun. Like, you do anything at that level of repetition, it's work.
No, it is. And it's work away, and it's the discipline a lot of people don't have. And again, coaching basketball, playing basketball, it's what you do away from the ball. So when the ball gets in your hands, you either give a good assist, or, you're effective on your shot. So that's your management mindset. And again, I want to give credit to Dr. Kleinfelder, because we worked together for over 4 decades in the finance field and also in the management field. And these are the soft factors that often people will overlook.
I don't meet anybody that says they have enough good what-be meetings. Most of us don't spend enough time working on the business. At ranching.fyi, we've developed the Meet Right course to help you be effective with daily meetings, weekly meetings, and quarterly and annual strategic meetings. Look up ranching.fyi, Meet Right. So I'd like to get a little practical with this if we can. You mentioned in our last episode that, 4% of the population has a written plan. Let's say that means that 96% of our listeners, assuming that we're average, don't have a plan. Where does a person start? I think for me, I like to break it out into some different components and then start creating, outcomes that I'd like to see. Where do you begin?
Well, I'd like to hear a couple of your components, and then I'll respond to you, John. How's that?
That sounds great. So for business, for example, we have some customer performance metrics. We judge ourselves a lot by the performance of our customers. We have some revenue targets that we would like to hit. And then we have some employee performance targets we would like to hit. So we outline those. And then, some of those things are things purely under our control. Some of them are not. But again, they when we put those things together, they contribute to our company being better in a variety of ways, financial impact and sustainability, right? That make us better over time. So go ahead.
Yeah, I'll build right on those.
Okay.
Because I think a very, very important aspect is every stakeholder, manager, owner in a business. I like to go through a goal setting, strategic goal setting type of session. And again, business, family, personal, mental, physical, spiritual, and do them separately, writing down. Don't let one person dominate it. And then, what we will often do? We will find commonality. amongst those goals. And then you're going to have differences. Any good business will have differences. And what you do is you'll focus on the commonalities, and then you'll kind of negotiate out the differences and be able to do that. But within those goals, you will have defined type of metrics that are out there. I'll never forget in our creamery, we were at 2 million in sales, and then I says, well, let's aspire to be 5 million, and then 10 million, and now 15 million. And everybody said, oh, it's impossible to do. But if you've got these little, what I call milestones along the way, it helps you. So the power of goal setting, I can't stress it enough. And let's go back to Dr. Kleinfeller. Each year, Dick Whitman, who's a consultant out of Idaho, he does a survey of the TPAP participants, and typically we'll find only about 25%. And these are not the biggest producers, but they've got what I call a management mindset. Even with that group, only 25% will actually have them written down. And so there's a lot of improvement even with that group on out there. But I just find that it's a basic out there that'll get everybody off the same page. And if you look at the environment we have today, it's all designed to get us non-focused, whether it's our technology, whether it's the news or what's, coming out there. Having those goals it'll give you that North Star that maintains your focus on out there. So that is something that I think is very, very critical in developing this 5%er type of mindset. And again, you said have specific measures. Of course, everybody probably knows they got to be SMART, specific, measurable, attainable, reasonable, and timely. I think the key
sometimes leave out the R, by the way, but yeah.
Yeah, I forgot it. Realistic. Yeah. Sorry about that.
I don't know. No, I often leave it out is what I'm saying.
Guess what? You just corrected the professor. But having those on a timely basis and being realistic is extremely important. So right there is a big one. You know what the other one is? And I will, in the TPAP group, it was about 50 to 60%. You know what a question I'm going to ask on the management mindset, and I'll be very straightforward. I want to know your cost of production. I want to know your break even. The thing is, a lot of folks don't know that cost of production and that break even and those metrics. You think about it. If you and I were to go on Shark Tank and pitch a business, they're going to ask the cost of production and the break even. I think if it's good enough for Shark Tank, it's good enough for business out there.
Real businesses, yeah.
Yeah, no. And boy, that's a big one. And you know what I tell folks? If you don't know your cost of production break even, then your lender is going to want more land as collateral.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think knowing that gives us an insight into also you mentioned right off the bat, and I don't remember the term you used, but that accountability, right? That actually I am paying attention. And this is how you know when you ask someone whether or not they are paying attention to those things, if they can answer that question or not, right?
Yeah, accountability is so important. And I'll hear a lot of people say, well, I got to fill out those financials for the lender out there. No, you're filling out those financials for yourself. And boy, when I hear that, it really kind of gets my blood pressure up a little bit. But again, cost production break even is very, very important. Again, these are some of the elements that are behind that management mindset. And then many farms and ranch businesses right now are in transition, and it's accelerating because my generation's aging out. And you know what's real interesting? 21% of American farmers and ranchers don't have a next gen. You know, one of my rewarding things is when I do seminars out there is finding, I call it scouting combines. Some of the older folks that are in there, boy, I want somebody to kind of carry on my legacy. Have you considered this person over here? And that is the weakest area sometimes in the non-financials, is having a transition plan. And by the way, you can't do it overnight. It's going to take you a couple of years to be able to do it. And you know what? Everybody says, well, I've got an estate plan. No. What is your transition of management? And I call it the 6-year rule. 6-year rule is very simple. You go back, younger generation goes back into a business. They aren't making management decisions within a 6-year period. Generally speaking, they're a hired person for life. No, there's nothing wrong with being a hired person for life. But if you aspire, that management mindset's got to be transferred over to that next generation. You know what the big problem is with the senior generation? And I've transitioned out of the creamery. You know what the biggest problem was? Giving up control, because you helped build this thing. And I've got a quote that you can put in here: to keep control, you got to give up control.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And that's a non-financial. Transition planning can either be regenerative or destructive. And I find that it'll take one or two paths. And going through those non-financial factors oftentimes dictates what's going to be the outcome, 3 years, 5 years from now. So transition planning is definitely one that we could do a whole podcast in that area.
Yeah. And again, separating management from ownership and being explicit about both of those things is very important.
Exactly. And everybody says, well, I got to have a lawyer draw up my transition plan. Lawyer's only part of
the team. They do ownership.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay. I've got one other question related to that. We've talked a lot about planning. I see situations where I sometimes worry about plans, and we all know MacArthur, I believe it was MacArthur's quote about it's not the plan, it's the value of the planning process, blah, blah, blah. I see too many people make plans and then almost get stuck with them. We live in a pretty dynamic environment. Take our current cattle market as it is, right? We can guess what prices are going to be 12 months from now, but likely they're not going to be what we think they are. And so part of your REM strategy is that monitoring, then we have to be adjusting. So when you're doing a planning process, when you're advising somebody in that process, how frequently are you doing that? How frequently are you modifying it? Maybe the creamery is a good example, maybe not.
Well, at the creamery, we monitor weekly, and we've got 4 or 5 indicators that we're watching for, like sales and revenue. We're watching our accounts receivable. We're watching the net profit margin, and we're watching it weekly. In this type of environment, even cow-calf operation, you might be selling the calves once a year or twice a year. You've got to monitor this at least quarterly, because things change. And you know what frustrates me? I'll hear lenders say, well, I get the financials once a year. A lot of things can occur during that once a year. And in this type of environment, this is where that sensitivity analysis, where you sensitize for price, cost, interest rates, production. And you know what? Sensitivity analysis, it allows you to form the guardrails. And occasionally you're going to get outside the guardrails. That's where you got the backup of working capital. But that allows you to tweak within it. And the whole thing is, people go through this planning process, put the plan in the desk, and not come back. That's a no-no at the quarter century mark. It's hard to believe we're at the quarter century mark, but that is a no-no. You've got to come back, tweak that plan. I'll just give you an example. Last year we used it at the creamery. Comes July, we have to buy our eggnog and custard ingredients. And the company came to us and said, boy, we'll give you a big cash discount if you can buy. Fortunately, we had a nice cash buildup. We bought our ingredients at 80 cents on the dollar.
Mm-hmm.
We had the most profitable 3-month period, October, November, December, because we had to adjust our plan. But we had the cash reserve to be able to do that. So I find that monitor is extremely important. And don't be monitoring late at night like I was mowing hay all day yesterday. It's the last time I want to look at my financials. Do it while you're fresh and energy. And I got to tell you, usually you'll have somebody within the business that takes the ownership of those financials that forces you to do that.
Yeah, very good. And if you don't have that person, you need to find that person.
Yeah, and that's where these advisory teams are so critical on out there. And again, we have a person totally outside our industry on our advisory team at the creamery. Another set of eyes, seeing it a little bit different, is very, very critical. So that sensitivity analysis is very, very important in this dynamic environment that we have today.
Good. And my impression whenever we do sensitivity analysis, it often kind of follows the 80-20 rule. There's a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't make that much difference, right? The price of fuel doubles, like, maybe it makes a difference, but not much. But if the market changes by 25%, oh boy, now we've got some. If interest rates double, we saw in 2021, we did a bunch of interest rate sensitivity with customers. In 2022, when we saw interest rates, double and triple in some cases, like, well, here we are. And the idea being we know ahead of time that is either a risk or an opportunity. And maybe we can take steps to mitigate that. So, if you have a variable rate loan, maybe we go, as you mentioned earlier, maybe we go ahead and fix that, and lock that in, not because it's necessarily a better deal, but because it reduces our risk.
John, I like to say, what's your big four? What's your big four that are going to be, really have an impact on you? And then what is your strategies on the big four? One of the big ones, and it's going to hit our creamery, we locked in on those low interest rates there during the COVID era. We've got some resets coming up in 27 and 29, but we've already been building for it because our interest rates are going to double, at least double on that out there. And so you look at what are the big four that could don't make it too complex, that could, change our bottom line. So I'm spot on with you.
Yeah, very good. We don't need to worry about the price of postage and a bunch of other stuff.
And
nobody's gone broke because of that.
You know what I'll see? Often we'll see people cut those, the minor cost out. No, let's focus on the big four, the ones that are going to, really impact us out there. Very, very good point. They get caught up in the minutia of everything.
Yeah, very good. Dr. Kohl, is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up?
No, it's a pleasure. And I just want to reinforce just 2 or 3 things. What are 3 ways you're going to be 5%er? The second thing is, what is your behavioral mindset, the cranium up here? And are you going to do the REM? Are you going to respond? But better yet, are you going to execute? And are you going to monitor? And then I just want to basically say what we covered here just recently. You can't wait once a year to look at your finances. You look at your business. You've established those goals up front, but then you come back periodically throughout the year and kind of see how you're progressing them, because that's called transformation of your business.
I love it. One thing on that too, maybe with just a little bit more. When we talk about looking at our businesses monthly or quarterly, similar to everything else in the world, lots of times you look at that and say, yep, okay, we're largely on track. Things are largely similar to what we had planned for. And so we're continuing. And then there are other times where, again, 2022 with interest rates being a perfect example, where it's like, wow, this is a big change. We need to jump on this. I still think the 80-20 rule kind of applies when we're doing our monitoring, where a lot of time it's like, okay, it's not that big a deal. We're on track. Whereas there is a small percentage of the time where things are very different and we need to be prepared and ready to take drastic action if need be.
No, you're exactly. That 80-20 rule is so, so important. The problem is people get unfocused on some of these.
They get lulled into a false sense of confidence, and then the big change happens and they don't respond. Yeah.
You know what I say? It's the stairs up, elevator down. That'd be a good way to end the podcast.
Perfect. I love it. Dr. Kohl, thank you so much. It is an honor to have you. So I look forward to visiting with you more. Yeah. Well, you have a wonderful day. Thanks to those of you that have listened in with us. I look forward to covering a lot of these topics in some of our future webinars and look forward to hearing more from you about it. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for tuning into the Ranchonomics podcast. We hope this episode helped you win today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with a friend.